Welcome to the Lucion Environmental Podcast channel with me, Grace Matthews. I'm joined today with Contaminated Land Specialist and Lucion consultant Alec Hales. Hello, Alec.
Hi, Grace.
So to begin, we'll take a brief summary. Where do you see the contaminated land industry at present?
Well, over recent years, awareness has grown within the asbestos industry. We've always been aware of the risks associated with asbestos, but recently, with the contaminated land especially, there's a requirement for further insight and knowledge into good practice and methods that can limit the liability to both the duty holders, the site owners, the principal contractors, that sort of thing really. And obviously the recent publication of the Syria guidance and the pending Joint Industry Working Group Code of Practice will all contribute towards that. We're up against a situation where there's no safe threshold for asbestos, so we have to manage the risk.
So in terms of liability, what can duty holders do?
Well, in terms of duty holders, site owners and principal contractors, they all need to realise that the responsibility for asbestos lies at their sites. In addition to the usual contaminated land factors such as the Part 2A, the National Planning Policy, the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012, they must be adhered to as well. So Regulation 4 and 5 highlight the duty to manage asbestos risk, not only to the employees but also to those off-site, such as residents and schools, and also they have to identify the presence of asbestos at site and take suitable and sufficient assessment of those.
Okay, so what issues differ between local authorities and private organisations when it comes to contaminated land?
With local authorities, the Part 2A regime is in place, so local authorities need to prioritise the sites within their district, prioritise them from high to low, and if there's a risk now at the present, then they need to investigate that further, they need to mitigate the risk and manage it. With private organisations such as construction companies, the like, they have to follow the National Planning Policy and they have conditions within their planning that they have to mitigate and manage, and the site has to be suitable for its end use.
Okay, so let's take a look at desktop studies. What's the importance of undertaking this?
Well, a desktop study within the contaminated land sector will be named a Phase 1 that looks at all of the contaminants. What I want to re-emphasise is the importance of the asbestos review within that. The importance of the historical review, checking the historical maps thoroughly, checking the historical asbestos contamination and checking the risks associated with that. Sometimes asbestos migration off-site is overlooked to residents and schools, and doing the initial study thoroughly will help produce a robust conceptual site model and also a preliminary risk assessment, which can then be updated following a site investigation.
So what is the first step duty holders should take when uncovering asbestos on sites?
Well, there's a number of steps they can take. Lucion have put together a stepped approach which is available on our website, but to give a basic premise, we look at the initial inquiry which is given by the client. We assess that, whether asbestos is present or not, and what type of asbestos. Could it become airborne? We can then follow that with a site walkover. I must say at this point, the client can come in at any one of these steps, but we've put a logical stepped approach together to help the client guide them through the process. So then we can do an asbestos review. We can look at the conceptual site model and the preliminary risk assessment associated with asbestos and other contaminants. We can then construct a fieldwork exercise. We can plan and how we're going to take the samples, the sampling strategy, and then we can undertake a site investigation. That generally involves an intrusive investigation to establish the asbestos within a site. We try to characterise the site, and following the sample analysis, we can then review the data and communicate that back to the client. The communication is an important step because that needs to be communicated to the statutory bodies, the local authority or the environment agency, whichever is relevant, and then we can put together an asbestos specification or even an asbestos strategy to go forward and to look at the remediation techniques or methodologies that could be implemented on the site.
Okay, let's touch on qualitative and quantitative analysis. What are the differences here?
Okay, so qualitative analysis is analysis that establishes whether asbestos is present. It can be known as an asbestos screen or an asbestos identification. It identifies whether asbestos is present, yes or no, and if it is, what type of fibre is it. With quantitative analysis, it looks at the percentage of asbestos by weight, the content within the soil sample, and it will give you a percentage as to the amount of asbestos within that sample.
So what new technologies does the industry have to offer?
Well, there's a raft of technologies out there at present, but scanning electron microscopy, SEM for short, really discriminates between asbestos fibres and non-asbestos fibres. The limit of detection is a lot lower than the traditional PCM, phase contrast microscopy, and it really benefits the outdoor environment. The benefits are really good because it obviously can distinguish between the fibres if there's any background fibres in the air, but it can also help the risk assessment for exposure. Like I mentioned earlier, with the absence of a safe threshold limit within soils in the UK at present, the lower limit of detection is really useful.
So looking to the future of contam land development, what can we expect to see over the next few years?
Well, the feedback we received from the Asbestos the Truth conference really demonstrated the ever-growing awareness surrounding contaminated land. We heard from a range of organisations, from councils through to utility companies, construction companies, all facing very similar issues. So we listened to our clients and we understood that the industry still has a way to go. However, Lucion will continue to provide thought leadership and investment in research and development in the future.
So in terms of guidance, are there any particular publications you'd recommend for duty holders?
Well, Lucion have played a part in the content creation for the Syria Asbestos Site Guide, estimated in late 2015, so that's definitely one to look out for. But in addition to this, we're very looking forward to the CLARE and Joint Industry Working Group Code of Practice, also due in 2015.
That's great, thanks Alec. And for more information on asbestos in soils and made ground, please visit www.lucion.co.uk.